The dust had barely settled from the stagecoach wheels when Lucas Ashford noticed the well-dressed woman being refused entry at the Santa Fe Grand Hotel. Her face flushed with humiliation as the clerk's voice carried across the New Mexico evening air in July of 1881. Lucas had just finished loading supplies onto his wagon, preparing for the trek back to his cabin in the foothills outside town, when he heard the commotion. He turned, his weathered hands still gripping a sack of flour, and watched as the woman straightened her spine despite the obvious distress etched across her features. She was perhaps 24 or 25, with auburn hair pinned beneath a traveling hat and a dress that spoke of Eastern refinement, though it bore the dust of hard travel. "I assure you, sir, I have the money to pay," the woman was saying, her voice steady but strained. "I sent a telegram ahead. There should be a reservation under Katherine Brennan." The hotel clerk, a thin man with a perpetual sneer, shook his head with exaggerated patience. "Miss Brennan, as I have explained, we received your telegram. However, we cannot accommodate unaccompanied ladies. It is hotel policy. We maintain certain standards." Lucas felt his jaw tighten. He knew what that meant. The Grand Hotel catered to wealthy travelers and merchants who expected a certain respectability. A woman traveling alone, regardless of her means, was deemed inappropriate for their establishment. It was a cruel reality of the times, one that Lucas had always found distasteful. Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her carpetbag. "Is there another hotel in town that might accommodate me?" The clerk's expression suggested this was beneath his concern. "The boarding house on 4th Street might take you in, though I cannot vouch for its quality. Good evening, miss." Lucas watched as Katherine turned away from the hotel entrance, her shoulders sagging for just a moment before she squared them again. The sun was beginning to set, painting the adobe buildings of Santa Fe in shades of gold and crimson. A woman alone on the streets after dark was asking for trouble, especially one who clearly did not know her way around. He set down the flour sack and wiped his hands on his work pants. His cabin was modest but clean, and he had enough provisions to spare. More importantly, he had something else he could offer, something that would give her the respectability these narrow-minded folks seemed to prize so highly. "Excuse me, miss," Lucas called out, crossing the dusty street toward her. "I could not help but overhear your situation." Katherine turned to face him, her green eyes wary. Up close, Lucas could see the exhaustion in her features, the tightness around her mouth that spoke of more than just travel fatigue. There was a deeper worry there, a weight she carried that had nothing to do with her carpetbag. "I appreciate your concern, sir, but I can manage," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Lucas removed his hat, revealing brown hair that needed cutting and a face lined by 30 years of hard work and honest living. "I do not doubt that, miss. But night is coming on and Santa Fe can be rough on strangers. I have a cabin about 5 miles out of town. It is clean and safe, and I would be happy to offer it to you for as long as you need." Suspicion flickered across her face, and Lucas could not blame her. A strange man offering shelter was exactly the kind of situation a sensible woman should avoid. "I know how this must sound," he continued quickly, "but I give you my word as a gentleman that you would be perfectly safe. There is a good lock on the door, and I can make myself comfortable in the barn. I have done it plenty of times during the hot summer months anyway." Katherine studied him carefully, and Lucas stood still under her scrutiny, letting her take his measure. He was tall and lean, his clothing practical rather than fashionable, and his face bore the deep tan of someone who spent his days outdoors. His eyes were a clear blue, and he met her gaze steadily, without the predatory gleam she had likely learned to watch for. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked finally. Lucas considered the question. My mother raised me to believe that when you see someone in need, you help them. Simple as that. Besides, that hotel clerk's attitude rankles me. No one should be turned away for doing nothing more than existing without a husband. A ghost of a smile touched Catherine's lips. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was, Lucas said softly. Passed on 3 years ago, but I try to live by what she taught me. Katherine seemed to make a decision. I thank you for your offer, Mr. Ashford, Lucas Ashford. Mr. Ashford, I am Katherine Brennan, as you heard. I accept your kind offer of the cabin, but I insist on paying you for the accommodation. Lucas shook his head. That will not be necessary, Miss Brennan. Though I do have one other suggestion, if you will hear me out. Katherine tilted her head, curious. The thing is, you are going to run into this same problem anywhere you go in Santa Fe. Respectable establishments will not take you, and the places that will, well, they are not places a lady should stay. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But if you were a married woman, no one would question your right to be here. So I am offering you my name as well as my cabin. We could visit the justice of the peace tomorrow, make it legal on paper. You would have all the protection and respectability that comes with marriage without any of the, well, the other expectations. It would be a marriage in name only, just to give you what you need to move about freely. The words hung in the air between them, and Lucas wondered if he had gone too far. It was an audacious proposal, the kind of thing that sounded halfway mad when spoken aloud. But he had seen too many women struggle alone in the West, their options limited by social conventions that made no sense to him. If he could help this one, even in such an unconventional way, it seemed worth the offer. Katherine stared at him as if he had just offered her the moon. You would marry a complete stranger just to give her respectability? I reckon I would, Lucas said simply. Like I said, my mama taught me to help where I can. This seems like a way I can help, and before you worry, I would not expect anything from you. We could even draw up papers saying the marriage can be dissolved whenever you wish. You would be free to leave any time, no questions asked. You truly are a peculiar man, Lucas Ashford, Katherine said, but there was warmth in her voice now, and some of the tension had left her shoulders. I hardly know what to say. Say you will let me help, Lucas replied. Even if you do not want to marry, at least come out to the cabin for the night. Get some rest, have a decent meal. You look like you have been traveling hard, and whatever brought you to Santa Fe, I am guessing it was not pleasure. Katherine's expression shifted, pain flickering across her features before she composed herself. No, it was not pleasure. I came here seeking a fresh start, away from some difficult circumstances back in Boston. I thought I had planned well, but I did not anticipate the complications of being an unmarried woman in a frontier town. Boston is a long way to come, Lucas observed. Sometimes you need to go a long way to leave things behind, Katherine said quietly. Lucas understood that sentiment well enough. Everyone who came west was running from something or towards something, often both at once. He did not press for details. Then let us get you settled. My wagon is just over there. We can discuss the other matter on the drive out, give you time to think on it. Katherine nodded, and Lucas retrieved her trunk from where she had set it near the hotel entrance. It was heavier than he expected, and he wondered what possessions she had deemed important enough to haul across the country. He loaded it into the wagon alongside his supplies, then helped Katherine up onto the bench seat. As they rode out of Santa Fe, the evening air cooled, bringing relief from the July heat. The landscape stretched out around them, vast and open in a way that still took Lucas's breath away even after all his years in New Mexico. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks touching the darkening sky. It is beautiful here, Katherine said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "It is that," Lucas agreed. "Took me some getting used to when I first came out from Missouri. The space of it all the way you can see for miles. But now I cannot imagine living anywhere else." "How long have you been here?" "Near about 10 years. Came out when I was 20, looking for adventure and maybe a fortune. Found the adventure anyway. The fortune proved more elusive." He smiled at his own youthful foolishness. "But I built my cabin, got myself a small herd of cattle, some chickens. It is a good life, simple but honest." Katherine was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have been thinking about your offer." Lucas's hands tightened slightly on the reins, but he kept his voice casual. "And what do you think?" "I think it is either the most generous thing anyone has ever offered me, or the most foolish thing you have ever proposed. Possibly both." She turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes were serious. "But I also think I do not have many other options, and I trust you, Lucas Ashford. I cannot entirely explain why, but I do." "Trust is not something to give lightly," Lucas said. "I am honored by it." "Then yes," Katherine said, her voice steady. "I accept your offer. Both parts of it. The cabin and the name. If you are truly willing to marry me without knowing anything about me, then I am willing to marry you without knowing anything about you. We can learn about each other as we go." Lucas felt something shift in his chest, a mix of apprehension and something he could not quite name. He had made the offer sincerely, but he had not expected her to accept both parts of it. Now that she had, the reality of what he was proposing hit him. He was about to marry a woman he had known for less than an hour. It was mad, reckless, the kind of decision that could complicate his simple life in countless ways. And yet, looking at Katherine's profile as she gazed out at the landscape, he did not regret the offer. There was something about her, a quiet strength mixed with vulnerability, that called to something deep within him. He had no designs on her, no expectations beyond helping someone in need. But he could not deny a certain curiosity about who Katherine Brennan was and what had brought her so far from home. "Then we will go into town tomorrow and see the justice of the peace," Lucas said. "John Garrett is a fair man. He will not ask too many questions if I vouch for you." "Will people not think this strange?" Katherine asked. Lucas shrugged. "Folks out here are used to unconventional arrangements. Plenty of marriages start for practical reasons rather than romantic ones. As long as we are legal and respectable, most will leave us be." They continued in silence for a while, the wagon creaking along the rutted road. Lucas pointed out landmarks as they went. The distinctive rock formation that marked the turn toward his property, the creek where he got his water, the stand of cottonwoods that provided shade on hot days. When they finally reached the cabin, full dark had fallen, but a nearly full moon provided enough light to see by. The cabin was small, just one main room with a loft above for sleeping, but Lucas had built it solid with thick log walls and a good roof. A barn stood nearby, along with a chicken coop and a small corral for his horse and the 2 cows he kept for milk. Lucas lit a lantern and led Katherine inside. The interior was tidy if sparse. An iron stove stood against one wall, with a rough-hewn table and 2 chairs nearby. A shelf held dishes and cooking supplies, and another held a modest collection of books. In the corner stood a bed frame with a corn husk mattress, covered in quilts his mother had made. The loft above provided additional storage and sleeping space. "It is not much," Lucas said, suddenly aware of how humble his home must appear to someone from Boston. "But it keeps the weather out and the stove draws well." Katherine set down her carpetbag and turned slowly, taking in the space. "It is wonderful," she said, and she sounded sincere. "It is warm and cozy, and it smells like wood smoke and something else, something green." Pine maybe. There are pine branches in the loft, Lucas admitted. Helps keep insects away and makes the place smell better than it would otherwise, what with a bachelor living alone. Katherine smiled, and it was the first real smile Lucas had seen from her. It transformed her face, easing the worry lines and making her eyes brighten. You are thoughtful, Lucas Ashford. Lucas felt heat rise to his face and busied himself building up the fire in the stove. I can make us some supper. Nothing fancy, but I have beans and salt pork, and I can make a decent pan of cornbread. Let me help, Katherine said, removing her hat and beginning to unpin her hair. Lucas tried not to stare as auburn waves fell past her shoulders. There was something intimate about seeing a woman let down her hair, even in such innocent circumstances. They worked together preparing the simple meal, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. Katherine was clearly accustomed to domestic work, despite her refined appearance. She handled the cornbread dough with practiced ease while Lucas fried the salt pork and heated the beans. You know your way around a kitchen, Lucas observed. My mother believed that all women should know how to keep a house, regardless of social station, Katherine said. After she passed, I kept house for my father and brother for several years before. She trailed off, then seemed to make a decision. Before my brother decided I should marry a business associate of his. The man was 45 years old and had already buried 2 wives. When I refused, my brother became quite insistent. Lucas set down the spoon he had been using to stir the beans. He tried to force you. Katherine's hand stilled in the cornbread dough. He said I was being foolish and ungrateful. He said at 24, I was nearly on the shelf and should be grateful for any offer. When I still refused, he told me I would either marry Mr. Calloway or find myself without a home. So I chose the third option and left for New Mexico. Anger kindled in Lucas's chest, hot and righteous. Your own brother turned you out. He said I was making my own choice, Katherine said quietly. He gave me a small sum of money, enough to travel and start over if I was careful. I suppose that was something. But yes, he made it clear I was no longer welcome in his home if I would not do as he wished. Lucas wanted to say something about brothers who would treat their sisters so shabbily, but he could see the pain in Katherine's eyes and knew she did not need his anger added to her hurt. Instead, he said simply, Then he is a fool and you are well rid of him. Katherine met his eyes and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Thank you, she said softly, for not judging me, for not asking why I did not simply accept what was offered. Some might say a marriage, even an unhappy one, is better than being alone. Then some are wrong, Lucas said firmly. No one should have to marry where there is no respect or affection just to have a roof over their head. You were brave to choose your own path. They finished preparing the meal in thoughtful silence, and when they sat down to eat, the food tasted better than the simple fare warranted. Perhaps it was the company, or perhaps it was the sense of rightness that had settled over the cabin despite the strangeness of the situation. After supper, Lucas heated water for washing up, then excused himself to tend to the animals and make himself comfortable in the barn. He gave Katherine one of his clean shirts to sleep in and showed her how to work the lock on the door from the inside. You really can lock me out, he said. I want you to feel safe here. Katherine looked at him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. She reached out and squeezed his hand briefly. I do feel safe. Thank you, Lucas. Lucas lay awake in the barn loft for a long time that night, listening to the sounds of the animals below and thinking about the turn his life had taken. This morning, he had been a simple rancher, content with his solitary existence. Now he was planning to marry a woman from Boston who needed his protection and his name. It should have felt overwhelming, but instead, It felt oddly right, as if some piece of his life he had not known was missing had suddenly clicked into place. In the cabin, Katherine also lay awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling and wondering if she had lost her mind. She had just agreed to marry a man she had met hours ago, to tie her life to his based on nothing more than a kind gesture and an instinct that he was good and decent. And yet, despite the insanity of it all, she felt more at peace than she had in months. The weight of her brother's disapproval, of her narrow escape from a loveless marriage, of all the difficult miles of travel, seemed to lift slightly in the warm safety of Lucas's cabin. Tomorrow would bring new complications, new decisions. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, Katherine felt like she could breathe. Morning came with the sound of a rooster crowing and sunlight streaming through the cabin's small windows. Katherine woke disoriented for a moment, then remembered where she was. She dressed quickly in a fresh gown from her trunk, one of her best, and pinned her hair up carefully. If she was going to marry today, she would at least look presentable. When she emerged from the cabin, she found Lucas had already milked the cows and gathered eggs. He had also, she realized with a touch of amusement, made an effort with his appearance. His hair was damp and slicked back, and he wore a clean shirt and pants that, while still simple, were clearly his Sunday best. "Morning," he said, tipping his hat to her. "I made coffee and there are fresh eggs if you are hungry." They ate breakfast with the awkwardness of people about to take a significant step together. The easy companionship of the previous evening had given way to nervous awareness of what they were about to do. "Are you certain about this?" Katherine asked as they prepared to head into town. "Last night in the dark, it perhaps seemed simpler than it does in daylight. I would understand if you have reconsidered." Lucas checked the wagon hitch, then turned to face her squarely. "I have not reconsidered. Have you?" Katherine thought about it, really thought about it. She could say no, could ask him to simply take her back to town, and she could try her luck at the boarding house. She could write to her brother and beg for his forgiveness, marry Mr. Calloway, and live a respectable but miserable life back in Boston. Or she could take this leap of faith with a man who had shown her more kindness in a few hours than her own family had shown in months. "No," she said firmly. "I have not reconsidered either." Lucas smiled, and Katherine noticed for the first time how it changed his whole face, softening the weathered lines and making him look younger. "Then let us go become respectable married folks." The ride into Santa Fe felt both longer and shorter than the previous evening's journey. They talked about practical matters, how Lucas made his living, the size of his property, what supplies they would need from town. Katherine told him about her skills, how she could keep accounts and had some knowledge of medicinal herbs from helping a neighbor woman back in Boston. "That will be useful out here," Lucas said. "The nearest doctor is in town, and that is 5 miles of rough road when you are feeling poorly. Most folks tend to their own ailments unless it is serious." At the Justice of the Peace's office, John Garrett was a heavy-set man with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He looked Katherine over carefully, then fixed Lucas with a stern gaze. "You sure about this, Luke? This lady is from back east, I can tell." "You have thought about what you are taking on." "I have, John. Miss Brennan needs a husband in name for respectability and protection. I can provide that." Garrett turned to Katherine. "And you, miss, you understand what marriage means in the eyes of the law. This man would have legal rights over you and your property." Katherine lifted her chin. "I understand, sir. But I also understand that Mr. Ashford is offering this arrangement without expectations or demands. We have an understanding between us." Garrett grunted. "Understanding or not, once you are married, you are married. I suggest you both be sure." He paused, then added, "That said, Luke is as honest a man as I have met in this territory. If you are set on this, you could do worse." "We are set on it," Lucas said. The ceremony was brief and businesslike. They spoke their vows standing in Garrett's office, with his clerk serving as witness. Katherine felt the weight of the moment as she promised to honor and cherish this near stranger, and she saw something flicker in Lucas's eyes as he made the same promises to her. When Garrett pronounced them man and wife, Lucas squeezed her hand gently, and Katherine squeezed back. They were married. The reality of it settled over Katherine as they left the office with their marriage certificate. She was now Katherine Ashford, wife of a New Mexico rancher, a lifetime away from Katherine Brennan of Boston. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt a curious sense of relief. "We should pick up some supplies while we are in town," Lucas said, ever practical. "If you are going to be staying at the cabin, we will need a few things. And you can choose whatever you need to make yourself comfortable. I know it is not what you are accustomed to." They spent the next hour at the general store, and Katherine was touched by Lucas's consideration. He let her choose fabrics for curtains, a better lamp for reading, and seeds for a small vegetable garden. He added items she had not thought of: extra blankets, a good wash basin, and a rocking chair he said his mother would have wanted in the cabin. The store clerk, a woman named Sarah who clearly knew Lucas, raised her eyebrows at the domestic purchases. "Getting civilized, Lucas. Just got married, Sarah. This is my wife, Katherine." Sarah's eyes widened, and Katherine saw the curiosity there, along with a hint of envy. "Well, congratulations. That was quick work. I did not even know you were courting anyone." "It was a bit sudden," Lucas admitted, unperturbed by her nosiness. "But when you know, you know." He said it so naturally, as if they were a real couple with a real courtship, that Katherine almost believed it herself. Or maybe she wanted to believe it, wanted to think that this marriage could become something more than a convenient arrangement. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, Lucas said, "We should stop by the hotel before we go. Let that clerk see that you are now a respectable married woman." Katherine laughed at the mischief in his tone. "Is that petty of us? Maybe a little. But I have always believed in proving narrow-minded folks wrong when the opportunity presents itself." They walked into the Santa Fe Grand Hotel hand in hand, and the clerk from the previous evening looked up from his ledger. His expression shifted from bland professionalism to surprise when he recognized Katherine. "Can I help you?" he asked stiffly. "My wife and I will be needing a room for tonight," Lucas said smoothly. "We have some business to attend to in town tomorrow, and it is too far to travel back to our ranch and return." The clerk's gaze moved from Lucas to Katherine, taking in their joined hands and the simple gold band Lucas had purchased along with their other supplies. "Of course, Mr. Ashford, Lucas Ashford, and this is my wife, Katherine Ashford." The clerk had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Of course, Mr. Ashford, we have a room available, if you will just sign the register." As they climbed the stairs to their room, Katherine whispered, "Did we really need a hotel room, or did you just want to prove a point?" Lucas grinned. "Bit of both. We do need to get some business done tomorrow, some legal matters about adding you to my property deed. Figured we might as well be comfortable and let that fellow stew in his own prejudice a bit." The room was spacious and well-appointed, a far cry from Lucas's simple cabin. There was a large bed, a settee, and a washstand with a porcelain basin. Katherine stood in the middle of the room, suddenly aware that they were married and sharing a room, even if it was all just for show. Lucas seemed to sense her discomfort. "I can sleep on the settee," he said immediately, "or on the floor, whatever makes you comfortable." "The settee seems reasonable," Katherine said, grateful for his continued consideration. "Though it hardly seems fair. You paid for the room." Fairness has nothing to do with it. I made you a promise that this would be a marriage in name only, and I intend to keep that promise." He set down the small bag he had brought. "Now, I have business at the bank and the land office. You can come with me if you like, or you can rest here. The streets are safe enough during the day if you want to explore the town." Katherine considered. Part of her wanted to rest, to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. But a larger part was curious about Santa Fe, about this place that was now her home. "I think I would like to see the town, if you do not mind the company." "I would be glad of it," Lucas said, and he sounded sincere. They spent the afternoon walking through Santa Fe, and Katherine fell a little in love with the old adobe town. It was so different from Boston, from the narrow streets and brick buildings she had always known. Here, everything seemed to glow in the strong sunlight, and the culture was a rich blend of Spanish, Mexican, and American influences. Lucas showed her the plaza, the old cathedral, and the market where locals sold produce and crafts. At the land office, Lucas made arrangements to add Katherine's name to his property deed. The clerk seemed surprised, but Lucas was firm. "What is mine is hers now," he said simply. "If anything happens to me, I want to make sure she is provided for." Katherine felt a lump form in her throat at his matter-of-fact generosity. They barely knew each other, and yet he was already ensuring she would have security. That evening they ate dinner at a small restaurant, and over tamales and beans, they continued the process of getting to know each other. Katherine learned that Lucas had come west after his father died, leaving behind nothing but debts. His mother had followed him to New Mexico a few years later, and they had worked the land together until her death 3 years ago. Since then, he had been alone, content, but perhaps a bit lonely, though he had not realized it until recently. "What about you?" Lucas asked. "What do you miss about Boston? What do you wish you could have brought with you?" Katherine thought about it. "I miss my mother, but she has been gone for 6 years now. I miss the libraries and the concerts, the feeling of being part of a city. But I do not miss the constraints, the constant judgment, the sense that every move was being watched and evaluated. And I certainly do not miss my brother." She paused. "It is strange, but I feel freer here, even though I know less about how to live in this place." "Freedom is part of what makes the West appeal to folks," Lucas said. "Out here, you can be whoever you choose to be. Your past does not matter as much as what you do now." They returned to the hotel as the sun was setting, both tired from the long day. Lucas made up a bed on the settee while Katherine prepared for sleep behind the privacy screen. As she lay in the large bed, listening to Lucas settle in across the room, Katherine thought about how strange and wonderful her life had become. She had been married for less than a day to a man she barely knew, and yet she felt safer and more valued than she had in years. "Lucas," she said softly into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for all of this. I know I have said it before, but I want you to know how much it means to me." There was a pause, then Lucas said, "You are welcome, Katherine, and thank you too." "For what?" "I have done nothing but accept your help." "For trusting me. For saying yes. I reckon I was lonelier than I knew, and having someone to look after, someone to talk to, it feels good, feels right." Katherine smiled in the darkness, warmth spreading through her chest. "It does feel right, does it not? Even though it should feel strange and frightening, it feels like I've come home." They fell silent after that, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind shared by people who were beginning to become companions as well as spouses. The next morning, they completed their business in town and headed back to the cabin. As they approached, Katherine looked at the small homestead with new eyes. This was her home now, her responsibility as much as Lucas's. The thought was both daunting and exciting. Over the next several weeks, they fell into a routine. Lucas taught Katherine about the land, about tending the cattle and chickens, about reading the weather and knowing when to plant and harvest. Katherine brought her own knowledge to their partnership, showing Lucas how to make medicines from the plants that grew nearby, how to keep better accounts of their expenses and income, and how to cook more than just beans and cornbread. They worked side by side through the hot August days, and slowly, steadily, their partnership deepened into genuine friendship. Lucas learned that Katherine had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh. Katherine discovered that Lucas was widely read despite his frontier lifestyle, and they spent many evenings reading aloud to each other or discussing books they had both enjoyed. They also learned each other's habits and preferences. Katherine liked her coffee strong and her mornings quiet until she had fully woken up. Lucas was an early riser who preferred to get chores done before the heat of the day. Katherine was meticulous about organization, while Lucas tended toward casual disorder. But instead of clashing, they balanced each other, each making space for the other's ways. It was during the third week of their marriage that something shifted between them. They were working together to repair a section of fence, and Katherine had just handed Lucas a nail when their hands touched. It was not the first time they had touched, of course. They worked closely together every day. But this time, something sparked between them, an awareness that went beyond friendship or partnership. Lucas felt it first, the way his heart jumped at the contact, the sudden acute awareness of Katherine's presence. He looked up and met her eyes, and he saw that she felt it too. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Katherine pulled her hand back, and Lucas released the breath he had been holding. Neither of them mentioned it, but something had changed. They were both aware of it, the way the air between them seemed charged with new energy. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lucas found the courage to speak. "Katherine, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever think about this becoming more than just a convenient arrangement?" Katherine was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "I think about it," she admitted. "But I worry. We entered this marriage with an understanding, with certain expectations, or lack of expectations, I suppose. I do not want to complicate that if you are happy with things as they are." Lucas turned to face her fully. "What if I am not entirely happy with things as they are? What if I have found myself wanting more?" Katherine's breath caught. "Lucas, I know we agreed this would be a marriage in name only," Lucas continued, the words coming faster now. "And I meant that when I said it. I had no designs on you, no expectations. But Katherine, these past weeks with you, getting to know you, working alongside you, I have come to care for you, truly care for you, and I cannot help but wonder if maybe this could become something real between us." Katherine felt her heart racing. She had been fighting these same feelings, telling herself it was gratitude or relief or anything other than genuine attraction and affection. But hearing Lucas' voice, what she had been feeling made it impossible to deny. "I care for you too," she said softly. "More than I expected to, more than I know how to handle. When you smile at me, when you consider my needs, when we laugh together, I feel something I have never felt before. I did not think I wanted romance or love. I thought I just needed safety and freedom. But with you, I find myself wanting both." Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she did not, he took her hand in his. "Then maybe we could start courting properly. I know we are doing this backwards, married first and courting after. But I would like to win your heart, Katherine, if you will let me try." Katherine looked at their joined hands, then up at Lucas's hopeful face. "You have already begun to win it," she confessed. "From that first moment when you offered to help a stranger, you started winning it. Every kindness since has just made it more certain." Lucas felt something warm and bright bloom in his chest. "So we can try. We can see if this can become a real marriage in every sense. We can try, Katherine agreed. Though I should warn you, I am not easy to live with. I have opinions and I will express them. I will not be a meek and silent wife. Lucas laughed. Katherine, I have lived with you for 3 weeks. I am well aware you have opinions and I value every one of them. I do not want meek and silent. I want you, exactly as you are. They sat together on the porch as stars began to appear, hands clasped, and something new and precious growing between them. The marriage that had begun as a convenient fiction was becoming real, building on a foundation of respect and companionship that had the potential to become something lasting and true. Over the next several months, they courted each other with the earnestness of young lovers, despite the fact that they were already married and living together. Lucas picked wildflowers for Katherine and left them where she would find them. Katherine learned to make Lucas's favorite foods and would surprise him with them after long days of work. They took walks in the evening, talking about everything and nothing, learning the landscapes of each other's minds and hearts. Lucas showed Katherine the places on his property that he loved most. The creek where he fished, the hilltop with views that stretched for miles, the grove of aspens that turned golden in autumn. Katherine shared her dreams with him, her hopes for their homestead, her ideas for expanding the vegetable garden and maybe raising sheep for wool. They began to share more physical affection, tentative at first, but growing more natural with time. A hand on the shoulder became an arm around the waist, became stolen kisses in the barn or while washing dishes together. Each touch was a revelation, each kiss a promise of more to come. It was late October, with the air turning crisp and the leaves changing color, when Katherine came to a realization. She had been married to Lucas for 3 months, and somewhere along the way, she had fallen completely in love with him. Not the careful, measured affection she had assumed would develop in a marriage of convenience, but the deep, passionate, all-consuming love she had thought existed only in novels. She watched him one evening as he read by lamplight, his face peaceful and intent, and her heart swelled with so much feeling she thought it might burst. This good, kind, generous man had given her everything: safety, freedom, respect, companionship, and now love. And she wanted to give him everything in return. "Lucas," she said, setting down her own book. He looked up, and something in her expression made him set his book aside too. "What is it?" Katherine stood and crossed to where he sat. She took his face in her hands, feeling the slight roughness of his evening stubble, the warmth of his skin. "I love you," she said clearly, letting him see the truth of it in her eyes. "I am in love with you, truly and completely, and I want this marriage to be real in every way. If you still want that too." Lucas surged to his feet, pulling her close. "If I still want it, Katherine, I have been in love with you since about the 2nd week we were married. I just did not want to rush you or make you feel obligated." "I do not feel obligated," Katherine said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "I feel blessed." That night, their marriage became complete. They came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other in this new way as they had learned each other in all the others. Lucas was gentle and patient, mindful of Katherine's inexperience, and Katherine gave herself to him with trust and joy. Afterwards, lying in his arms in the bed they would now share every night, Katherine felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked, concerned. "Did I hurt you?" "No," Katherine said quickly, pressing a kiss to his chest. "No, you were perfect. I am crying because I am happy. Because I never thought I could have this, never imagined that the terrifying leap I took in coming west would lead me to you. I thought I was running away from something, but I was really running toward this, toward you." Lucas held her tighter, pressing his lips to her hair. "I feel the same. I thought I had a good life before you came, thought I was content. But you have shown me the difference between contentment and joy. I was just existing before. Now I am living." They lay awake talking long into the night, making plans and promises, dreaming aloud about their future together. They talked about expanding the ranch, about maybe having children someday, about growing old together on this land they both loved. The winter that followed was cold but cozy, with the two of them snug in their cabin while snow fell outside. They spent the long evenings reading, talking, and making love, building their relationship deeper and stronger with each passing day. In the spring, Katherine discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be certain before telling Lucas. When she finally shared the news, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time, and told her she had made him the happiest man in New Mexico. "Are you frightened?" he asked later, when the initial excitement had settled. "A little," Katherine admitted, "but mostly I am excited. This child will be born of love, Lucas. Real, true love. That is a precious gift to give a baby." Lucas rested his hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to be good parents. We will teach this child to be kind and brave, to think for themselves, to value people over conventions. We will teach them that family is not just about blood, but about choosing each other and standing by those choices," Katherine added, thinking about how she and Lucas had chosen each other, had built a family from nothing more than kindness and courage. Throughout the pregnancy, Lucas was attentive and protective without being overbearing. He insisted on taking over the heavier chores but respected Katherine's desire to remain active and useful. He read everything he could find about childbirth and infant care, and made a cradle with his own hands, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Katherine bloomed under his care, her body changing to accommodate the life growing within her. She felt beautiful and powerful, connected to something ancient and elemental. Lucas told her every day that she was gorgeous, that she glowed, that he had never seen anything more lovely than her carrying their child. In early November, just over a year after their marriage, Katherine went into labor. Lucas rode to town to fetch Sarah from the general store, who had experience as a midwife. The labor was long and hard, and Lucas paced the cabin floor, helpless and terrified as Katherine labored through the hours of pain. But when dawn broke and the sound of a baby's cry filled the cabin, Lucas felt his heart crack open with a love so fierce, it nearly brought him to his knees. Sarah emerged from behind the curtain they had hung for privacy, smiling widely. "You have a son, Lucas. A big, healthy boy, and Katherine did beautifully." Lucas rushed to Katherine's side. She was pale and exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of his mother's quilts. "Look," she said softly, her voice hoarse. "Look at what we made." Lucas looked down at his son's red, wrinkled face and felt tears stream down his own. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot believe he is really here." "We need a name," Katherine said. "We talked about so many, but now that I see him, none of them seem quite right." They had discussed names for months, going back and forth on various options. But now, looking at their son, Lucas said, "What about Thomas? After your mother's father, the one you said was kind to you when you were a girl." Katherine's eyes filled with fresh tears. "You remembered that." "I remember everything you tell me. You said he used to sneak you peppermints and tell you that you were smart enough to do anything you set your mind to. Seems like a good namesake for our boy." "Thomas Ashford," Katherine said, testing it out. "Yes, that is perfect." Little Thomas was a content baby, healthy and strong. He had Lucas's blue eyes and Katherine's auburn hair, and both parents were helplessly devoted to him. Lucas proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle with the baby, happy to walk the floor with him at night so Katherine could rest. The first year of Thomas's life was one of adjustment and joy. Katherine managed the household and the baby while Lucas worked the land, but they both shared in parenting duties in a way that was unusual for the time. Lucas was not ashamed to change nappies or soothe a crying baby, and Katherine continued to help with the ranch work when she could, with Thomas strapped to her back or napping nearby in the shade. They had challenges, of course. Money was sometimes tight, and the work was never ending. There were illnesses and injuries, difficult weather and disappointing harvests. But they faced everything together, their partnership strengthened by love and mutual respect. When Thomas was 2 years old, Katherine became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. And when their daughter arrived in the spring of 1884, screaming with indignation at being thrust into the world, both parents laughed with delight. "She is fierce," Katherine said, watching the baby girl root around for milk. "Look at her determination." "She takes after her mother," Lucas said proudly. "What should we name this fierce little lady?" They settled on Margaret Rose, called Maggie for short, after Lucas's mother. The name felt right, a way of connecting their children to the woman who had raised Lucas to be the kind of man who would help a stranger without expecting anything in return. With 2 children, life became even busier. Thomas, with the contrariness of a toddler, was into everything, while Maggie demanded constant feeding and attention. But Lucas and Katherine navigated it with humor and teamwork, stealing moments of connection when they could. One evening, when the children were finally asleep and the cabin was quiet, Lucas pulled Katherine onto his lap in the rocking chair and held her close. "You remember that first night?" he asked quietly. "When I offered you my cabin and you looked at me like I might be mad?" Katherine laughed softly. "I thought you were mad, or dangerously naive. I could not understand why anyone would help a stranger the way you were offering to help me. And now I understand that is just who you are. You see someone in need and you help them. It is not naivete or madness. It is goodness." She turned to look at him, her eyes soft in the lamplight. "You saved me, Lucas, not just from a difficult situation, but from a life half lived. You gave me freedom and love and a family. You gave me everything." Lucas kissed her forehead. "You saved me too. I did not even know I needed saving, but I was lonely and stuck in my ways. You brought light and life into this cabin, into my heart. Everything good in my life now comes from the moment I decided to talk to a woman being turned away from a hotel. The best decision you ever made." Katherine teased. "The very best," Lucas confirmed. "Well, that and deciding to offer you my name along with the cabin, that was inspired." Katherine settled more comfortably against him. "I used to be so angry at my brother for forcing me out, for making me leave everything I knew. But now I am grateful. If he had not been so stubborn and cruel, I never would have come to New Mexico. I never would have met you. Our children would not exist. This whole beautiful life would not exist." "Funny how things work out," Lucas mused. "The worst thing that happened to you led to the best thing that happened to both of us." They sat together in the rocking chair, swaying gently, listening to the sounds of their children's breathing and the night sounds outside. It was a simple moment, quiet and domestic, but it held everything that mattered. As the years passed, the Ashford family grew and thrived. Thomas grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books like his mother and the land like his father. Maggie was indeed fierce, with opinions about everything and the determination to make herself heard. In 1887, Katherine gave birth to another son, whom they named Daniel. And in 1889, a second daughter arrived, called Sarah after the woman who had helped birth all of Catherine's children and had become a dear friend. The ranch prospered under Lucas and Catherine's joint management. Catherine's organizational skills and head for numbers complemented Lucas's knowledge of ranching and his skill with animals. They expanded their herd, added sheep as Katherine had once dreamed, and built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, though they kept the original cabin for storage and memories. Lucas taught his children to work hard, to treat all people with respect regardless of their station, and to help those in need. Katherine taught them to read and cipher, to question unjust conventions, and to value education and curiosity. Together, they raised children who were kind and capable, ready to make their own marks on the world. There were sorrows along the way. They lost a baby between Daniel and Sarah, a daughter who came too early and lived only a few hours. The grief nearly broke them both, but they held each other through it and came out stronger on the other side. Their love deepened by shared pain as well as shared joy. Lucas's health was always robust, but Katherine had bouts of illness that frightened them both. Each time, Lucas nursed her with tender devotion, and each time she recovered, though she grew a bit more fragile with each passing year. The years of hard work and multiple pregnancies had taken their toll, but she never regretted it, never wished for the easier life she might have had in Boston. As their children grew and began to leave home, starting families of their own, Lucas and Katherine found themselves returning to where they had started. Two people alone in a cabin, learning each other all over again. They were older now, grayed and lined by time and weather, but the essential connection between them remained strong. One evening in the summer of 1901, they sat on the porch of their house, which now seemed too big with all the children gone. Thomas was married and running his own ranch nearby. Maggie had married a lawyer and moved to Albuquerque, though she visited often. Daniel was still at home but would be heading off to study veterinary medicine in the fall. Sarah, their youngest at 12, was playing with the chickens in the yard. 20 years, Katherine said suddenly. Has it really been 20 years since I stepped off that stagecoach? Lucas reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. 20 years since you turned my life upside down. I think it was you who did the upending, Katherine pointed out. I was just trying to find a place to sleep. And instead, you found a family. Katherine leaned her head on his shoulder. They had white hair now, both of them, and their bodies ached with the work of all those years. But the love between them was stronger than ever, refined by time into something precious and enduring. You think, Katherine asked, that if I had known that day what the next 20 years would hold, I would have said yes so quickly to your proposal? Lucas considered. I do not know. Would you have believed me if I told you how happy we would be? How much love we would build? Probably not, Katherine admitted. I was so guarded then, so sure that happiness was not meant for me. I thought I was accepting a practical arrangement, nothing more. I could not have imagined all of this. She gestured at the house, the land, at Sarah playing in the yard. I could not have imagined you. And now I cannot imagine life without you. You are woven into every part of me, Lucas. Every good thing I am, every ounce of courage I have found, comes from your love and belief in me. Lucas kissed her temple. You were always brave and strong, Katherine. I just gave you a safe place to let those qualities shine. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had worked together for 2 decades. Sarah came running up, her braids flying behind her, demanding that her father come see the new chick that had just hatched. Lucas groaned good-naturedly as he got to his feet, his joints protesting, but his eyes were warm as he let his daughter pull him toward the chicken coop. Katherine watched them go, her heart full. This was the life she had built from nothing, from desperation and a stranger's kindness. Every hard moment, every challenge, had been worth it for this. A family built on love, a partnership that had weathered every storm, and a man who still looked at her after 20 years like she was the most precious thing in his world. As the years continued to pass, Lucas and Katherine settled into the comfortable rhythms of a long marriage. They celebrated the births of grandchildren, welcomed new sons-in-law and daughters-in-law into the family, and watched with pride as their children carried forward the values they had instilled. Thomas and his wife had 3 children and ran a successful ranch that bordered his parents' property. The two families worked together during busy seasons, and Lucas took great joy in teaching his grandchildren the same skills he had taught their father. Maggie, true to her fierce nature, became involved in women's suffrage movements in Albuquerque, using her lawyer husband's connections to advocate for women's rights. Katherine could not have been prouder, seeing her daughter fight for the kinds of freedoms and respect that Katherine herself had found in her unconventional marriage. Daniel became an excellent veterinarian and returned to Santa Fe to practice, often helping his father and brother with their herds. He married a teacher from town, and they had 2 daughters who spent their summers at their grandparents' ranch. Sarah, the youngest, inherited her mother's love of learning and her father's connection to the land. She became a teacher, but unlike most women of her time, she did not give up her career when she married. Her husband, a newspaper editor, supported her work, and Katherine saw in their partnership echoes of her own marriage. In 1910, as Katherine and Lucas celebrated their 29th anniversary, they gathered all their children and grandchildren at the ranch for a big party. It was a warm September day, perfect for the outdoor celebration, and as Lucas looked around at the crowd of people laughing and talking, eating and playing, he felt overwhelming gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Katherine asked, coming to stand beside him. "I am thinking that all of this started with one impulsive decision. One moment when I could have just minded my own business but chose to get involved instead." "Thank goodness you did," Katherine said, slipping her arm through his. "Thank goodness you saw a woman in need and decided to help." "Best decision I ever made," Lucas said, pulling her close. "Offering you my cabin and my name." "You offered me so much more than that," Katherine said. "You offered me freedom and respect and love. You offered me a life I never could have imagined." Thomas approached with a glass of whiskey for his father and a cup of punch for his mother. "Papa, Mama, everyone wants to hear the story of how you met, the grandchildren especially. They think it is terribly romantic." Lucas and Katherine exchanged amused glances. Over the years, their meeting and hasty marriage had become something of a family legend. "Well," Lucas began, settling into a chair with Katherine beside him, their family gathering around. "It was July of 1881, and I had just finished loading supplies into my wagon when I heard a commotion at the Santa Fe Grand Hotel." He told the story with Katherine interjecting details and corrections, their voices overlapping in the way of couples who had spent decades finishing each other's sentences. The grandchildren listened with wide eyes, asking questions about the stagecoach and the hotel, and what it felt like to marry someone you had just met. "Were you scared, Grandma?" asked Maggie's oldest daughter, a girl of 8 named Katherine after her grandmother. "Terrified," Katherine admitted, "but also hopeful. Sometimes you have to be brave even when you are scared. Sometimes the scariest thing turns out to be the best thing." "Did you fall in love right away?" asked one of Thomas's sons. Katherine smiled at Lucas. "Not right away, no. First we became friends, partners. We learned to respect each other and trust each other. The love came after, but when it came, it was built on a strong foundation. The best love stories are not about love at first sight, Lucas added. They are about two people choosing each other every day, through good times and hard times, and building something that lasts. As the party continued, and the sun began to set, Lucas and Katherine slipped away to the porch of the original cabin, the one where their life together had really begun. They stood in the doorway, looking at the single room that had once been Lucas's whole house. "Remember that first morning?" Katherine asked. "When I woke up and did not know where I was for a moment. I remember being nervous as a schoolboy, wondering if you would change your mind about the whole thing." "I never even considered it," Katherine said. "From that first night I felt safe here, safe with you." Lucas wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in brilliant colors. They were both 70 now, their bodies worn by hard work and time, but their love remained vibrant and alive. "If you could go back," Lucas asked, "and tell that frightened woman standing outside the hotel one thing, what would it be?" Katherine thought about it. "I would tell her that in a few moments, a cowboy is going to offer her his cabin and his name. I would tell her to say yes to both without hesitation, because that cowboy is going to give her the most beautiful life she could ever imagine. What about you? What would you tell that cowboy loading his wagon?" "I would tell him to be ready for his whole world to change. To be ready for joy he never knew existed, for love deeper than he ever imagined, for a partnership that would challenge him and fulfill him and make him better than he ever was alone." They turned to face each other, and Lucas cupped Katherine's face in his weathered hands. "Thank you," he said simply, "for saying yes, for trusting me, for building this life with me. You are the greatest blessing I have ever known." Katherine rose on her toes to kiss him, just as she had done countless times over their 29 years together. "And you are mine. My unexpected savior, my partner, my love." As they walked back to join their family, hand in hand just as they had left the justice of the peace's office all those years ago, they carried with them the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived and a love well earned. The years continued to be kind to Lucas and Katherine. They remained active well into their 70s, still working the ranch with help from their children and grandchildren. Their love remained a steady, constant thing, the cornerstone around which their family had been built. In the spring of 1915, as they celebrated their 34th anniversary, Lucas planned a surprise for Katherine. He had been secretly working on a project for months, with help from their children. When he finally revealed it, Katherine stood in the clearing behind their house, tears streaming down her face. It was a garden, but not just any garden. Lucas had created a beautiful space with paths winding between flower beds, a small fountain, and benches placed to catch the best views. There were roses, Katherine's favorite, and herbs she used for cooking and medicine, and vegetables arranged in artistic patterns. But the centerpiece was a carved stone marker with an inscription. "In this place, Katherine and Lucas Ashford built a life from kindness, courage, and love. May all who rest here remember that the greatest adventures begin with simple acts of compassion." "When did you do all this?" Katherine asked, overwhelmed. "I had help," Lucas admitted. "Thomas did most of the heavy work and the girls picked out the plants. But I wanted you to have something beautiful, something that showed you how much our life together has meant to me." Katherine walked through the garden, touching the flowers and running her fingers along the benches. It was perfect, a living monument to their love and their family. That evening, as they sat on one of the new benches watching fireflies begin to appear in the dusk, Katherine leaned against Lucas's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that first night? How different our lives could have been if you had just walked away from the hotel?" "I think about it sometimes," Lucas admitted. but I cannot really imagine it. Not helping you, not marrying you, it would be like trying to imagine a world without the sun. You are so fundamental to who I am now." "We were so young," Katherine mused. "I was 24 and thought myself quite mature and worldly, but I knew nothing, really. Nothing about love or partnership or what it meant to build a life with someone. We learned together," Lucas said. "That was the beauty of it. Neither of us knew what we were doing, but we figured it out as we went. And now look at us," Katherine said with a smile. "Old and gray and still sitting together watching the sunset. Still in love," Lucas added. "That is the important part. After all these years, I still get a lift in my heart when I see you. I still want to tell you about everything that happens in my day. I still want to hold your hand and hear your thoughts and wake up beside you every morning." Katherine turned to kiss him softly. "I love you, Lucas Ashford. I have loved you for most of my adult life, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They sat together until full dark, wrapped in blankets against the spring chill, talking about the past and the future, about their grandchildren's futures and the changes they had seen in the world. When they finally went inside, they walked slowly, bodies stiff but hearts young, still holding hands just as they always had. In the years that followed, they continued to age gracefully together, their minds remaining sharp even as their bodies grew more frail. They celebrated the births of great-grandchildren, saw New Mexico become a state, and witnessed the world changing in ways they never could have imagined back in 1881. Through it all, their love remained constant. They had their disagreements, of course. No marriage, even the happiest, is without conflict. But they had learned early on to talk things through, to listen to each other, to compromise and forgive. The respect that had been the foundation of their unusual beginning never wavered. In 1920, as they approached 40 years of marriage, Katherine's health began to decline. She had always been the more fragile of the two, and the winters were becoming harder for her. Lucas became her primary caretaker, tending to her with the same devotion he had shown throughout their marriage. One evening in early December, as snow fell softly outside, Katherine called all their children to the house. They came quickly, worried by the urgency in her message. When they were all gathered in the large sitting room, Katherine sat in her favorite chair with Lucas beside her, holding her hand. "I wanted you all here," she said, her voice weaker than it once had been but still clear, "because I have something to tell you. The doctor says my heart is failing. It is not sudden, just the natural result of a long, full life, but he does not think I have much time left." The room erupted in protest and tears, but Katherine raised her hand gently. "Please let me finish. I'm not afraid, and I do not want you to be sad. I have had the most extraordinary life, more than I ever dreamed possible. I have been loved deeply and completely by the best man I have ever known. I have raised 4 beautiful children and seen them grow into wonderful adults. I have held grandchildren and great-grandchildren in my arms. There is nothing left undone, nothing I regret." She turned to Lucas, whose face was wet with silent tears. "Except leaving you, my love. That is my only sorrow." Lucas could not speak. He just held her hand tighter, as if he could keep her with him through sheer force of will. Katherine looked at each of her children in turn. "I want you to remember that life is short and precious. Build your lives on love and kindness, just as your father and I did. Help those in need. Take chances on people. The best things in life often start with simple acts of compassion." She paused, tired from the long speech. "And take care of your father. He is going to be lost without me for a while. Make sure he eats properly and does not work too hard. Make sure he knows he is loved." Over the next few weeks, the family kept vigil. Katherine grew weaker, sleeping more and eating less. But she was never in significant pain, and when she was awake, she was surrounded by love. Lucas rarely left her side, sleeping in a chair next to their bed, holding her hand even in sleep. On a quiet morning in late December, as weak winter sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, Katherine woke to find Lucas watching her. "Good morning, my love," she whispered. "Good morning," Lucas said, brushing her silver hair back from her face. "How are you feeling?" "Peaceful," Katherine said. "Lucas, I need to tell you something. Anything. Thank you for everything. For seeing me that day at the hotel, for offering your help, for marrying me and giving me your name. Thank you for 39 years of love and partnership, for our children, for this beautiful life. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted." Lucas's tears fell freely now. "You saved me too, Katherine. You brought light and joy into my life. You taught me what real partnership looks like, what real love looks like. I have been the luckiest man alive to spend these years with you." Katherine smiled, that same smile that had first caught Lucas's attention all those years ago. "I am tired, Lucas. I think I am going to sleep now." "Sleep, my darling. I will be right here when you wake." But they both knew she would not wake again. Katherine closed her eyes, still smiling slightly, and slipped peacefully away as Lucas held her hand and whispered his love. The funeral was held in the garden Lucas had built for her, despite the cold December weather. It seemed fitting that she should be laid to rest in that place of beauty they had created together. The whole family gathered, along with friends from throughout the territory, to celebrate Katherine's life. Lucas stood at the graveside, looking at the faces of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and he saw Katherine in all of them. Her kindness in Thomas's patient nature, her determination in Maggie's activism, her love of learning in Daniel's career, her strength in Sarah's independence. She lived on in all of them, in the values she had instilled and the love she had given so freely. The weeks and months after Katherine's death were the hardest of Lucas's life. After nearly 4 decades of partnership, he felt adrift, unsure how to be just himself instead of half of a whole. His children worried about him, checking on him daily, inviting him to stay with them. But Lucas remained in the house he and Katherine had built, surrounded by memories of their life together. He found comfort in routine, in the work of the ranch, in time spent with his grandchildren. And gradually, the sharp edge of grief softened into a bittersweet acceptance. He lived for 5 more years after Katherine's death, remaining active and engaged with his family and his land. He loved to tell stories about Katherine to anyone who would listen, keeping her memory alive through his words. And every evening, regardless of weather, he would sit on the bench in the garden and talk to her, telling her about his day, about the family, about how much he missed her. In the spring of 1925, Lucas passed away quietly in his sleep, just a few months past his 75th birthday. His children found him the next morning, peaceful in the bed he had shared with Katherine for so many years. On his nightstand was a worn piece of paper, their marriage certificate from 1881, and beside it, a letter he had written. The letter was addressed to all his descendants, those alive and those yet to be born. In it, he told again the story of how he had met Katherine, of how a simple act of kindness had led to the greatest love of his life. He urged them to live with compassion, to help those in need, to choose love over fear. He ended the letter with these words: "If you remember nothing else about your old grandfather, remember this. The best things in life often start with simple acts of kindness. I offered a cabin and a name to a woman in need, and in return, I received a lifetime of love and joy. Never be afraid to reach out to someone who needs help. You never know what beautiful things might grow from that one small act of compassion." Lucas was buried beside Katherine in the garden under a shared headstone that read simply, "Lucas and Katherine Ashford, Married July 1881. Partners, friends, lovers. They built a life from kindness. In the years that followed, the ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations. The original cabin was preserved as a family museum of sorts, filled with artifacts from Lucas and Catherine's life together. Children and grandchildren would visit and hear the story of the couple who had met in such unconventional circumstances and built such an extraordinary love. The garden became a gathering place for family celebrations, wedding venues for descendants who wanted to honor their ancestors by starting their own marriages in that place of love and beauty. And always, someone made sure there were fresh flowers at the grave, a reminder that the love between Lucas and Katherine continued to bloom long after they were gone. Their story became a family legend, told and retold, embellished perhaps but always true in its essence. That Lucas Ashford, a simple cowboy, had seen a woman in need and offered her his cabin and his name, asking nothing in return. That Katherine Brennan had taken a leap of faith and accepted, trusting a stranger with her future. And that from that improbable beginning, they had built a love that endured for nearly 40 years and echoed through generations. Decades later, long after both Lucas and Katherine had passed, their great-great-granddaughter stood in the garden on her wedding day. She wore Katherine's carefully preserved wedding band as her something old, and she held flowers picked from the same garden where her ancestors were buried. As she stood with her new husband, looking at the marker Lucas had placed in the garden so many years ago, she thought about the courage it must have taken for Katherine to say yes to a stranger's proposal. She thought about Lucas's kindness, his willingness to help without expecting anything in return, and she thought about how their simple choice had rippled forward through time, creating a family built on values of compassion, respect, and love. "What are you thinking about?" her new husband asked. "I am thinking about my great-great-grandmother Katherine and how brave she was. How she came all this way alone, how she accepted help from a stranger, how she built a whole new life from nothing but courage and trust. And I am thinking how lucky I am to come from a family that started with such a beautiful love story." Lucas and Katherine did not just build a family, they built a legacy of kindness and compassion that still guides us today. Her husband squeezed her hand. "Then let us do the same. Let us build our own legacy, starting today." As they walked back to join their wedding guests, the sun set over the New Mexico landscape that Lucas and Katherine had loved so much, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors it had shown on that July evening in 1881, when a cowboy had seen a woman in need and chosen to help her. The garden bloomed around them, lovingly tended by generations of family members who understood that they were caretakers not just of land and flowers, but of a love story that had proved love could grow from the simplest seeds: kindness, courage, and the willingness to take a chance on a stranger. In the years since, the world had changed in ways Lucas and Katherine could never have imagined. But the fundamentals of what they had built remained timeless: the importance of compassion, the value of partnership, and the transformative power of love freely given and gratefully received. Their story lived on, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with a single simple act of kindness, and that the best love stories are not about perfection or grand gestures, but about two people choosing each other every day and building something beautiful together, one day at a time. And so the legacy of Lucas and Katherine Ashford endured, a testament to the idea that when you see someone in need, you help them, because you never know where that simple act of compassion might lead. It might lead to a lifetime of love, to generations of family, to a story worth telling and retelling long after you are gone. In the end, Lucas and Catherine's story was not remarkable because of grand adventures or dramatic events, but because of its quiet, steady devotion. It was remarkable because two people chose to build a life together based on respect and kindness, and because that choice created ripples that spread forward through time, touching lives they would never meet, but whose existence was made possible by their love. The cowboy who offered his cabin and his name to a stranger had no way of knowing what he was starting that July evening in Santa Fe. He just knew that someone needed help, and he had the means to provide it. That Katherine accepted was equally brave and equally significant. Together, they created something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes, a legacy of love that proved the very best things in life often grow from the simplest acts of human kindness.